Welcome to the mental grand. The day my parents called me into the living room, I already knew something was off. They had that careful tone, the one they used when they'd already decided my future and were just about to inform me. My sister, Chloe, sat beside them on the couch, calm and polished as always, scrolling on her phone like none of this concerned her. I stood there, arms crossed, trying to prepare myself for whatever comparison was about to come next. They didn't waste time. My dad cleared his throat and said they had decided to help both of their daughters get a proper start in life. My mom smiled tightly, like this was supposed to feel generous. Then she announced it. Chloe was getting a brand new apartment in a downtown high-rise. Modern building, concierge, rooftop pool, the whole package. My sister finally looked up and gave a little smirk, already picturing herself there. Then my mom turned to me. They were giving me a house. For half a second, hope flickered. A house sounded big, permanent, like maybe, just maybe, this time things were actually equal. Then they pulled up the address and the photos on the tablet. The hope died instantly. It wasn't a house. It was a project. Old, dilapidated, with cracked siding, boarded-up windows, a roof that sagged in the middle, and a front yard choked with overgrowth. It looked forgotten, like the neighborhood itself had turned its back on it. My mom rushed to explain that it was full of potential and that I was the capable one, the one who could see past the mess, so this suited me better. Chloe, she said, needed something turnkey and secure. That was the moment the words burned themselves into my memory. The same words later splashed across my life like a warning sign. My parents gave me a crumbling wreck and my sister a luxury apartment. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that this wasn't fair, that I'd worked just as hard, that I'd never asked to be the low-maintenance daughter. But years of conditioning, of being the reasonable one, kicked in. I nodded. I thanked them. I swallowed the bitterness whole. They signed the papers quickly. The house was mine, they said. No mortgage, no rent, just mine. Chloe's apartment, on the other hand, was fully paid for by them for the first year. Furnished, decorated. My mom had even helped choose the throw pillows. I moved into the house a week later. The first night, a cold autumn rain leaked through the ceiling in 3 different places. The ancient furnace wheezed but produced no heat. Every floorboard screamed under my feet. But I stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the smell of dust and mildew, and told myself this was still an asset, a foundation, however shaky. I worked 2 jobs. Days were spent at my office admin job, hoarding every spare dollar. Nights and weekends, I became a student of home repair. I watched endless video tutorials, borrowed tools from a reluctant neighbor, and scraped my knuckles raw on rust and rot. I replaced the roof one terrifying section at a time. I learned to mud drywall. I hauled decades of accumulated junk out of the backyard. Slowly, painfully, the house began to change. Not quickly, and never gracefully, but it changed. Months bled into a year. I turned that wreck into a home. Not a showplace, but something solid, warm, and honest. The kind of place that only comes from pouring your own sweat into it. I planted a vegetable garden out back. I sanded and stained the old oak floors until they gleamed. I rebuilt the back porch into a small, sunny reading nook. That's when my parents asked to visit. My mom walked through the front door and stopped dead. Her eyes did a quick, sweeping inventory. The clean, painted walls, the new energy-efficient windows, the sunlight streaming onto the refinished floors. Her lips parted, not in pride, but in something colder, calculation. My dad hung back by the doorway, his jaw working silently. Chloe wasn't there, but her presence was. I could feel the impending comparison hanging in the air. My mom finally spoke, and her words landed like a physical slap. "Kendra," she said, her voice too bright, "this is quite a transformation. It's really too much house for just you now, isn't it? We've decided it would be best if Chloe moved in here. You have 48 hours to pack your things." I stared at her, my brain refusing to process the sentence. She went on, explaining how Chloe's apartment felt cramped now, how family resources should be balanced fairly, how this beautiful home was wasted on a single person. She said it all with this placid, logical tone, as if she were rearranging furniture, not upending a life. I reminded her, my voice strangely flat, that the house was legally mine. She waved a dismissive hand. The paperwork was always flexible, honey. We're family. We'll sort it. My dad studied a spot on the floor. That silence hurt more than her audacity. 2 days later, Chloe showed up. She arrived in a moving truck, boxes stacked haphazardly, her posture radiating victory. She was already dictating to a friend where she'd put her sectional sofa, what wall she'd knock down for an open concept. Then she stepped fully into the living room and stopped. All the color drained from her face. Her smug smile vanished. Her eyes darted from corner to corner, from the custom shelving I'd built to the tiled kitchen backsplash I'd laid myself, like she was seeing a mirage that refused to dissolve. That moment echoed another line that would later define everything. When my sister arrived with her boxes, her face turned pale at the scene she saw, because what she saw wasn't just a nicely renovated house, it was a testament. It was something she couldn't replicate, something she hadn't earned, something rooted not just in lumber and tile, but in the very soil it stood on. And none of them yet understood the truth about that land, or why giving me that decaying house was the one miscalculation they'd never be able to correct. And that's where everything truly began. Chloe stood there, frozen, a box labeled "Kitchen Good Stuff" sagging in her arms. My mom mistook her stunned silence for approval and beamed, already mentally redecorating. My dad repeated the 48-hour ultimatum, firmer this time, as if authority could replace legality. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just looked at Chloe, who finally caught my gaze and flinched, confused by the small, calm smile on my face. Because in that moment, I realized the depth of their oversight. They had been so fixated on the structure, the burden they'd given, and the prize it had become, that they completely ignored the most critical part, the land it stood on. When my parents handed me the deed a year earlier, numb with disappointment, I actually read it. Every single line, every footnote. The house was described as an as-is liability, a white elephant they were relieved to offload. But the land title was separate, and in the rush of their generosity, they had never properly transferred it back into their own names after some long-ago tax issue. It was an oversight buried in bureaucratic fine print. More importantly, the zoning was unique, a grandfathered claused mixed-use designation that allowed for both residential and small commercial development, a quirk lost on everyone but city planners and savvy investors. While they were busy picking out quartz countertops for Chloe's apartment, I was busy fixing leaks and quietly consulting a real estate attorney. Not to fight my family, but to understand the exact dimensions of what I now possessed. And what I possessed wasn't just a renovated cottage. I owned a parcel of land that a boutique development firm had been quietly pursuing for 2 years. That was why 4 months ago, I'd signed a conditional sale agreement. The developers didn't care about the house. They wanted the land, its zoning, its access to the upcoming Greenway extension. The deal was contingent on the property meeting basic safety and code standards. The final inspection had been signed off on just 3 days before my parents' visit. The funds were already in escrow. So when my mom said for the 3rd time, "We need you to start packing, Kendra. This isn't your home anymore," I finally replied. I asked her, calmly, how exactly she planned to reclaim property that was legally and entirely in my name. She bristled. "We're your parents. We gave it to you. Family doesn't operate on technicalities." That's when I walked to the desk I'd salvaged and refinished and pulled out the folder. Deed, zoning certification, purchase agreement. I laid them on the kitchen counter. I'd tiled with my own hands. A heavy, suffocating silence crashed down. My dad reached for the papers first. His hands developed a fine tremor as he read. My mom peered over his shoulder, her face tightening with each clause, each number. Chloe took a step closer, her earlier panic now curdling into dawning horror as she realized this was no longer a simple game of musical houses. I told them the truth, slowly and clearly, leaving no room for their twisted interpretation. The house was mine, the land was mine, and in less than 10 days I would own neither, because I was selling, not to Chloe, not back to them, to a corporation that had offered me market value, which was substantial. My mom's voice was a brittle thread. How much? I told her the figure. The blood left her face. It was more than they'd spent on Chloe's apartment's first year and the down payment they'd gifted her, combined. It was more than they could ever have imagined spending on me. It was more than they could possibly match. Chloe started to cry, angry, hot tears. This isn't fair. I told everyone. I picked out new curtains. This was supposed to be mine. I looked at her, the sister who had always been handed the finished product, and said gently, "But it never was." That line echoed in my mind, perfectly clear now. My parents gave me a crumbling wreck and my sister a luxury apartment. They didn't know who owned the land. They saw a pile of problems and gave it to the daughter they thought could handle problems. They never imagined she could turn it into power. They cycled through every tactic. Guilt. After all we've done for you. Anger. You're tearing this family apart. Desperate bargaining. What if we got you a condo? A nice one. My dad finally made eye contact. Pleading. But the bridge had been burned down by their own hands, and I was already on the other side. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. 2 weeks later, the representatives from the development firm came for the final walkthrough. Chloe never moved in. The boxes were reloaded onto the truck. My parents' calls became infrequent, then stopped altogether. The sale closed without fanfare. I stood across the street on that last day, watching the sunset glaze the windows of the house I had rebuilt from nothing. I felt a profound peace. That house had never been my punishment. It had been my proving ground. With the proceeds, I bought a small, beautiful townhouse in a town I chose for myself. No ghosts, no comparisons, no lingering sense of debt or obligation. Just peace and the quiet hum of my own agency. I heard through the grapevine months later that Chloe's apartment was listed for sublet. My parents needed to recoup their investment. Funny how the scales eventually find their own balance. I'm telling you this story because stories like mine don't start with grand plans for vengeance. They start in a quiet living room with a gut punch of unfairness. They start with being underestimated, overlooked, and handed the gift of struggle. If you've ever been given less, expected to smile through inequality, or told to be grateful for scraps, remember this. Sometimes the very thing they dismiss, the burden they're so eager to offload onto you, holds a value they are completely blind to. They might give you the rubble, never realizing they've just handed you the cornerstone.